You know that feeling when everything in your space is slightly out of place, and it's like there's a low hum of static electricity running through your nervous system? That one book spine facing the wrong direction, the kitchen counter with three unrelated items creating visual chaos, the drawer that won't close all the way because something inside shifted, and you can't rest. You can't sit down with your coffee and just be until it's fixed. To everyone else, you're just someone who likes a clean home, organized, put together, maybe even impressively disciplined. But here's what they don't see. The organizing isn't about the space at all. It's about you. It's about the fact that somewhere deep in your nervous system, there's a belief that if you can just control this, if you can just make the external world predictable, symmetrical, contained, then maybe you'll finally feel safe. This is the core paradox of the compulsive organizer. The very thing that once gave you a sense of agency in an unpredictable world has now become the cage that keeps you from ever truly relaxing. The control that saved you is now the thing slowly suffocating your capacity for spontaneity, for mess, for the beautiful chaos of being human. You didn't choose this, you adapted to it, and now you're an adult standing in your immaculate home, surrounded by labeled containers and color-coded systems, wondering why you still feel so anxious. Let's talk about what's actually happening in your brain when you feel that compulsion to organize. There's a concept in psychology called locus of control, the degree to which you believe you have power over the events in your life. For people who grew up in environments that felt chaotic, unpredictable, or emotionally unsafe, the external locus of control becomes terrifying. When you can't control whether your parents will fight tonight, whether there will be enough money, whether the mood in the house will shift without warning, your nervous system goes into overdrive, seeking anything it can control. In your room, your space, your belongings, those you can control. This is where something called environmental mastery becomes your survival strategy. Environmental mastery is your ability to choose or create environments that suit your psychological needs. But for the compulsive organizer, it's not about creating comfort, it's about creating predictability. Your brain, stuck in what neuroscientists call a state of chronic hyperarousal, learns that organizing provides a temporary reprieve from the anxiety. Every item in its place becomes a small promise. See, you can make things okay. You can impose order on chaos. Think of your nervous system like a smoke detector. In a healthy system, the alarm goes off when there's actual danger, a real fire. But in childhood environments marked by unpredictability or emotional volatility, that alarm gets miscalibrated. It starts going off when someone moves your things, when dishes sit in the sink overnight, when life gets even slightly messy. Your organizing isn't about cleanliness, it's your smoke detector screaming that something is wrong, and you've learned that organizing is how you silence it. The tragic brilliance of this adaptation is that it works, temporarily. Organizing does regulate your nervous system. It does give you a dopamine hit, a sense of completion, a moment where the world feels manageable. But here's the neurological trap. The more you rely on external order to create internal calm, the more your brain reinforces that pathway. You're literally training your neural circuitry to believe that you're only safe when everything is controlled. This is what psychologists call a maladaptive coping mechanism, a strategy that helps in the short term but damages you in the long term. So what's the cost? What do you sacrifice at the altar of your perfectly organized life? You sacrifice presence. You sacrifice the ability to exist in a moment without scanning for what's out of place. You walk into a room, and instead of seeing the people you love, you see the pillow that's crooked, the remote that's not parallel to the table edge, the shoes that aren't lined up by the door. Your attention isn't yours anymore. It's been colonized by your need for control. You sacrifice connection,
Because real intimacy is messy. Real relationships mean someone else's rhythms, someone else's chaos, someone else's way of doing things entering your controlled environment. And when your nervous system is wired to equate mess with danger, other people become threats. You find yourself resenting your partner for leaving a cup on the counter, feeling genuine distress when your children scatter toys, becoming quietly furious when guests don't follow your invisible rules. You're not angry at them, you're terrified of what their disorder represents. You sacrifice rest. True rest requires the ability to let go, to surrender, to trust that everything doesn't need to be perfect for you to be okay. But you can't let go. There's always one more thing to organize, one more system to implement, one more area that needs optimization. Your home becomes less a sanctuary and more a museum you're the curator of, endlessly maintaining, never truly inhabiting. The philosopher Alan Watts once said, "The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance." But you can't join the dance when you're trying to choreograph every step. You can't move with life when you're trying to pin it down, label it, contain it in matching bins. This is the invisible grief of the compulsive organizer. You're homesick for a feeling of ease you've never actually experienced. You're trying to create through external perfection what was never given to you internally, a foundational sense that the world is safe, that you are allowed to take up space messily, that your worth isn't contingent on how well you can control your environment. And the cruelest part is no amount of organizing ever makes you feel safe enough. The anxiety always returns, because the real chaos isn't in your home, it's in the fact that life itself is fundamentally uncontrollable, and you're trying to solve an internal problem with an external solution. So what does this look like in your adult life? How does this childhood adaptation show up decades later?
You might find yourself unable to relax in your own home. Even after everything is clean and organized, you're still scanning, still vigilant. Your body doesn't register done. The goalposts keep moving. There's always another level of organization to achieve, another system to implement. You've turned your home into a to-do list that can never be completed. You become someone who struggles with hosting, because when people come over, they bring unpredictability. They might move things, use the wrong towel, leave crumbs, put something back in the wrong spot. You spend the entire gathering in a state of low-level panic, following people around, wiping surfaces, unable to actually enjoy the connection because you're too busy managing the environment. You might experience intense shame spirals when you can't maintain your standards. Depression hits, or you get sick, or life gets overwhelming, and suddenly you can't keep up with your organizing systems. And instead of recognizing this as a normal human limitation, you internalize it as failure. The mess becomes evidence of your unworthiness, triggering the exact shame that made you need control in the first place. You become the person who can't travel comfortably. Hotel rooms feel chaotic. Other people's homes make you anxious. You can't rest in spaces you don't control. You might even find yourself mentally rearranging their furniture, judging their clutter, unable to be present because your nervous system is screaming that this environment isn't right. In relationships, you might be labeled controlling or rigid, but that's not who you are. It's what you had to become to survive. Your partner doesn't understand why their mess bothers you so much, why you can't just let it go. They think you're being critical or perfectionistic, but what you're actually experiencing is your nervous system interpreting their coffee cup on the counter as a threat to your safety. You struggle with creative projects or hobbies that involve mess, painting, gardening, cooking experimentally, crafting with children. These activities that should bring joy instead trigger anxiety because they require temporarily surrendering control. You can't let yourself play in the mess, so you avoid these experiences entirely.
Or you sanitize them, organizing your art supplies so meticulously that you never actually make art. You might have difficulty delegating or accepting help, because help means someone else doing things their way, which means loss of control. You'd rather exhaust yourself doing everything right than experience the discomfort of someone else's method. You've essentially imprisoned yourself in the role of sole caretaker of order. You experience organizing as both compulsion and punishment. When you're anxious about something you can't control, a relationship conflict, a work problem, an existential crisis, you organize. It's your go-to regulation strategy. But it never actually addresses the real issue. You're just moving the anxiety around, rearranging the furniture in a burning house. Here's what you need to understand. These aren't personality flaws. These are coping strategies masquerading as preferences. The real work isn't learning to organize better. It's learning to tolerate the discomfort of disorder, the vulnerability of mess, the reality that you cannot control your way to safety. The path forward requires you to witness these patterns without judgment, to notice when the urge to organize arises and ask, what am I actually trying to control right now? What feeling am I trying to avoid? Often, the mess you're cleaning up in your physical space is just a proxy for the emotional mess you don't feel equipped to handle. So how do you heal? How do you unlearn the belief that your worth is measured in your ability to maintain order? You start by practicing what therapists call titrated exposure to discomfort. You intentionally leave one thing out of place and sit with the anxiety it creates. You resist the compulsion to immediately fix it, and instead notice what comes up. Fear? Shame? A sense of impending doom? You breathe through it. You teach your nervous system, slowly and compassionately, that safety doesn't require perfection. You begin reparenting your inner child, the kid who learned that controlling their environment was the only way to feel okay. You speak to that part of yourself with radical gentleness. It's safe to make a mess. You don't have to earn your place here. The world won't fall apart if things are out of order. You practice what Brené Brown calls wholehearted living, showing up in the mess, in the imperfection, in the beautiful chaos of being human. You invite someone over when your house isn't perfect. You leave dishes in the sink overnight. You let your child's toys stay scattered. And you notice that you survive, that the world doesn't end, that you might even feel a strange kind of freedom in the surrender. You might explore somatic practices, yoga, meditation, breathwork, that help you discharge the chronic tension your body holds. Because this isn't just a mental pattern, it's stored in your tissues, in your perpetually braced shoulders, in your jaw that never fully relaxes. You need to teach your body, not just your mind, that it's safe to let go. The psychologist Rogers wrote, "The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change." You don't heal by organizing yourself into wellness. You heal by accepting that you are enough, exactly as you are, in all your imperfect, messy, beautiful human disorder. Your home isn't meant to be a museum or a showroom or evidence of your worth. It's meant to be lived in, truly lived in, with all the clutter and chaos that real life brings. The goal isn't to become someone who doesn't care about organization. The goal is to become someone whose sense of safety isn't dependent on it, to transform organizing from a compulsion into an occasional choice, to be able to sit in a messy room and still feel at peace. You are not broken for needing control. You are adaptive, intelligent, and deeply resilient. You survived chaos by creating order. That was brilliant. But you don't live in that chaos anymore, and it's time to teach your nervous system that truth. The most organized life isn't the most controlled one. It's the one where you're free enough to let things fall apart sometimes, trusting that you'll be okay anyway. If this resonated with you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. And remember, healing isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole.